We've been working with solving addition and subtraction equations, and now we're going to look at how to solve multiplication and division equations. Again, just like our first day of adding and subtracting, this is going to seem very, very easy for you, but we are practicing these skills now while the numbers are easy and things work out very smoothly, so that way when it gets more complicated later on, you have this tool in your toolkit to be able to go back and figure out, pull those tools out to use them so that you can figure out the problems. Every step that I show you needs to be completed in your work. You need to make sure that you are showing your work. That way I can go back and help you figure out any mistakes that you may have made. Here's our first problem, and you'll notice that we have the 4 and the x right next to each other. We've talked about this and how when we have a coefficient and a variable, that means that those values are being multiplied. So this means 4 times x. Just like before, our goal is to isolate the variable. We want to get that variable all by itself. And in order to do that, we have to use the opposite operation. And we have to make sure we keep our equation balanced. So whatever we do on the left side of the equal sign, we have to do on the right side of the equal sign. So in this case, this is a multiplication problem. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to make these into fractions because we know that a fraction represents division. And when I look at this, I'm trying to get the x by itself. So in order to do that, I'm going to divide by 4. And then the 12 also needs to be divided by 4. Now, technically what happens here is when you divide 4 by 4, you end up with 1. So we would have 1x, but 1 times x is the same as x. It's just x. So we don't ever write that 1 in front of the x. We just leave it as x. So we cross these out because these cancel. And then 12 divided by 4, of course, is 3. So then our answer is 3. And we know this is true if we substitute it back in. If I rewrite my equation using 3 for x like we worked on earlier. So I would write the 4, substitute 3 for x, and that's supposed to equal 12. Well, we know that's true. 4 times 3 is 12. So this answer is correct. We know it's right. Here, I have a little bit of a different situation. I've got -6 that's being multiplied by x. So what that means is that I'm going to have to divide both sides by that -6. If I divided just by a +6, a -6 divided by a +6, if we use our tic-tac-toe method, a negative divided by a positive is a negative. And we don't want a negative x. We want to make sure that it's a positive x. So that means I'm going to use this of a negative divided by a negative is a positive because I want that x to be positive. So I'm going to divide both sides by 6 and -6, and this cancels. So I'm left with x. And then I've got 24 divided by a -6. So then I'm dividing a positive by a negative, which is going to give me a negative. And then 24 divided by 6 is 4. And we can check again. We can substitute in to make sure that this is right. And I can see that it definitely is right here because a -6 times a -4 is going to give me a positive 24. So let's look at what happens when we have to use division. As you guys know, we've talked about it a lot. A fraction is just another way to write a division problem. So here I have x, some number, being divided by 3 gives me 12. So in order to solve this, I need to use the opposite operation. The opposite of division is multiplication. So I'm going to put parentheses around both sets of terms on each side of the equals sign. I'm going to put a parentheses around x over 3, and I'm going to put parentheses around 12 because I'm going to be multiplying to solve this. And I'm going to multiply both of these by 3. Both sides of my equation get the same treatment. They both are going to be multiplied by 3. Now, on the right side of the equation, this is going to be easy. 12 times 3, all of you know, is 36. Well, now we've got 3 times x over 3. Well, this is really the same as multiplying 3 over 1 times x over 3, and then we can cross cancel. 3 divided by 3 is 1, 3 divided by 3 is 1. So now I've got 1 over 1 times x over 1. Well, all these 1's cancel each other out, and we're just left with x. So x is 36. And we know that this is true if we substitute back in 36 for x. And I have 36 over 3 is equal to 12. Let's think about that. Is that right? Is 36 divided by 3 12? It absolutely is. So we know that our work is correct. So now here what I'm going to do is I am going to show you kind of a shorter way to do that. We're dividing x divided by 5. So I know I'm going to have to multiply. I have to use the opposite operation or the inverse operation. So the opposite of dividing by 5 is multiplying by 5. And so here I don't need to write out all of the 5 over 1 and all of the 1's. We know that these 5's are going to cancel. Dividing by 5 and multiplying by 5 are going to give us the same answer that we began with. It's going to leave us just with that x, which is what we want. And then here I have negative 25 times 5. A negative times a positive is a negative. And then 25 times 5 is 125. So that means that x has a value of negative 125. And if I substitute that back in, negative 125 divided by 5 is going to equal negative 25. Yes, that's absolutely true, because we've got a negative divided by a positive, which is going to result in a negative, and then 125 divided by 5 is 25. So I know that this answer is correct.